Good evening. Good evening. So the first thing to say is I'm very inspired and happy to see, meet people with a spiritual interest these days. The spiritual interest seems to be waning. It's not as strong as it was in the old days. There was more of general spiritual interest in the old days, and spiritual interest actually means one's virtue or wishing for goodness. There's just a general goodness in the heart, and as technology, etc., and conditions increase externally, materially, people are losing the insight which connects to the bigger picture. People are getting more involved with just this life, just what they want, and just a material pleasure. And there's a far bigger, deeper thing going on in life and existence generally. So we must try to not just live, but actually learn what living is, be interested in what life is. We are distracted by survival, having to survive, especially if we have to work all the time, full-time job. This can take up our whole life. And so I think it's safe to say that the fully enlightened Buddha, even though it was 2,500 years ago, in the sutras and the various 84,000 teachings and more that the fully enlightened Buddha gave, he foresaw that in the future there would be times when people are distracted by materialism and different things going on around the world. I mean, there's all sorts of obstructions and sufferings which obstruct one's spiritual practice, obstruct one's spiritual interest. So the first thing I'd like to say is congratulations, because each one of you has come here tonight because you've got a spiritual interest. And the spiritual interest is so important. It's more important than any other interest in life, because only through the spiritual interest can you be led, you lead yourself to the spiritual practice. The spiritual practice cannot start. You will not enter into the spiritual practice without having that interest in the first place. And it is said that a human, just to have the spiritual interest in mind, is because of causes in the past. I don't know if all of you realize that there are past lives and future lives, but to be honest, if the fact that this life could be only one thing and have no causes, it would make it different to everything else in the entire universe. Everything in the universe is an effect of an earlier cause, and the same goes for this life, your life. Obviously, the body, we know the physical body came from the mother and the father. And so we know the causes of the body, but the mind is quite different. The mind, all the consciousnesses and everything we do with the mind have causes, but the actual root mind is the kind of one exception. It's a natural, invisible, infinite basis, utterly pure, and it's in all of us. Every being shares this natural, pure basis of mind. And it's upon that natural, pure basis of mind, because that is there in all of us right now, this very moment, that we can work to remove the obstructions from that and attain eventually enlightenment. But before enlightenment, there's liberation, which means liberation from all suffering. And that is the ultimate goal of the spiritual path. Basically what happens is we've got these two components of body and mind. And as I say, the body is temporary, but the mind actually is not just our thinking, our peripheral gross mind thinking that we use in this life. There's a far deeper, there's a lot more to mind than just our every day-to-day thinking. And so we need to reveal that, and that is what the Buddhist path and the Buddha's teachings are aimed at, because that is where the real happiness is. So what do we mean by happiness? Peace. Peace is the real happiness. It doesn't sound very exciting, but actually when we consider all the suffering in the world and all the aggression and all the negative minds and all the negative actions that are happening, peace, actually you suddenly realize that peace, contentment, satisfaction, it's a very valuable thing, very special thing. And we all seek happiness. We all want happiness. And we are all trying to avoid suffering. Everything we do is to avoid suffering. When we eat, when we sleep, everything, is suffering. And this suffering is obviously the body. But it's the mind. Try to understand that it's the mind that experiences the suffering. And these two things are quite different. The suffering, the body may cause the suffering. You may have pain in the body. But there's also another kind of suffering that one has in the mind, and this is caused by one's idea of the self. One's idea of the self is really the main problem, the cause of all the suffering, cause of all our problems. And so I'd just like to say, this is only a sort of preliminary talk because I want to do the refuge prayer, but what I'm getting into is that as you've probably noticed, this entire world seems to be overrun by this one big problem, which is selfishness. There is selfishness everywhere. It's not just, in the invading of other countries and wars. There's subtle selfishness, people, we're all instinctively survivalist. We want to protect ourselves and what we've got. It comes naturally to us. But actually, this idea of, what it boils down to is another word that's a bit harsh, but it's called ego. And if we can get rid of this, or at least diminish this, as we diminish the idea of self, the qualities of the raw natural mind come to the surface, and a real happiness starts to dawn. And this is the secret to the Buddha's enlightenment. This is the actual Buddhist path, to not do what we conventionally do in worldly life, which is try to gain happiness through the self. Trying to gain happiness through the self is known as pleasure, temporary pleasure, which is fine, but once that support, whatever it is, listening to music, going for a nice walk, seeing your favorite band, whatever it is you're doing, when that activity stops, the enjoyment stops, and we say to our friend, I had a lovely walk. I really enjoyed that. And so what we're saying to our friend is, I felt happiness, enjoyment while it was happening, but now it's over. And so all the worldly pleasures that are to do with the self are like that. They're short term, and they don't really bring the real happiness, the real peace. So what does bring the real happiness and the real peace? The real happiness and the real peace comes with the end of self-cherishing, the end of self-grasping, the end of ego. Is very difficult, especially in the West. The West promotes arrogance and confidence and self, but if you, through meditation, obviously the Buddhist path is very meditation orientated. And through this meditation practice, we can slowly decrease the self. And like I say, as the self and all of the symptoms, if we talk about the self and treat the self as a disease, then the symptoms of that disease are pride, anger, stinginess, jealousy. I'm sure none of you people have any of these things, but it's very common for this self, this idea of I, me, or we can call it I-ness or me-ness. It's there all the time. It's there when we sleep. It's there when we're awake. The mind is full at the moment of this idea of self. We constantly think about it. Now, the problem with this, and I'm going to try and now, through the logical reasoning, logically prove to you that it's not really as real as it seems. And that is because there is the body and there is the mind. And as you know, the body came from the parents. So your body you think of as you, and but the body came from the parents, was produced by the parents, and it's made of the elements. It's made of the earth. That's why we need to eat to sustain. That's called sustenance, because we're sustaining the earth element. And we drink water because we need to sustain the water element. And air, we need to breathe constantly because of the air element. And the fire is a bit complicated. It's the warmth of the body, but also it's to do with digestion. But anyway, so you'll get the picture. The body, if you go through the parts of the body, the physical body, there is no part of that body which you can actually point to and say, that is me. The meanness that you feel towards the body is in the mind. It's a thought, it's a concept, it's and everyone, all the beings, animals, every being feels it and is living by it. And they attack and they defend. And so what I'm saying to you is, although the self seems to be our best friend and we cherish it and protect it, and actually it causes all the suffering. It causes defensiveness, it causes jealousy, it causes stinginess, it causes greed, it causes all the problems in the world. Every single problem in the world is caused by this selfishness. So the Buddhist path is a graduated path. I mean, I'm just giving you an overview of the whole point so that you understand what the poison to be removed is, the arrogance and the pride and the jealousy and the self-cherishing. And the main thing that is removed, the real beauty, for me personally, I'm so grateful to Buddha for this, is that it removes the fear. There's so much fear that comes from cherishing the self. And when we get ill, when things go wrong, when we lose treasured possessions or relatives, the self, it's the self. It's the attachment caused by the self which causes the heart pain, the really deep pain and suffering. And it's all completely unnecessary. So this is the body side of the self. And then the mind side of the self is the fact that the mind is just a never-ending, continuous consciousness, a pure awareness. And we must take refuge in that. We talk about taking refuge in the Buddha and the Buddha's teaching, the Dharma, and the bodhisattvas, the surrounding practitioners with the Buddha and emanations of the Buddha as being the refuge. But actually all these three refuge, these jewels, these three precious jewels, actually can all be summed up in the pure nature of mind. The pure nature of mind is shared by all beings. It's absolutely pure. And once we uncover it, we remove the self, we remove all our concepts that and karmic concepts, karmic propensities, which have been caused by the self over a long time before this lifetime. The happiness comes, the true joy, the true peace. We can finally relax. We don't need to chase after anything. We don't need to fear anything anymore. So this is the overall meaning of what the Buddha found in the forest, because obviously originally, when I say found, I mean actually Buddha was enlightened before he was born, but he used that final human life. I don't know if you know the story, but he was born to a great king, and he was the heir to the throne. And when the Buddha was born, the king called 8 soothsayers to the palace, very clairvoyant, wise people, and asked them to prophesy about the newborn king, prince that will be king. And 7 of the 8 soothsayers said, he will be a great worldly king or a great spiritual king, the greatest worldly king or the greatest spiritual king. But the 8th one said he will only be the greatest spiritual king. And obviously his father did not like that. His father wanted an heir to the throne and protected the young prince for as long as he could from anything to do with spiritual life, and completely surrounded him with worldly pleasure of the most supreme and wonderful, kept him in the palace grounds, and there were animals and exotic birds and friends and sports and everything that was available in those days, magical ancient India days, wonderful Indian summers, etc. And until he was into his early 20s, that worked. Well, apart from one day when he was 8 years old, and he was watching some friends play on the lawn, and he was sat under a tree, ironically, and something happened internally. A perfect peace arose, absolutely perfect, which was not supported by anything that was happening. So nothing external, nothing physical. It was an independent core peace at the center of his heart. And at the time, he just thought it felt lovely and moved on. But later, he realized that this was something very special. Anyway, so in the early 20s, he suddenly became inquisitive and asked if he could see what was beyond the palace walls and beyond the luxury. And the king did his best to keep him away and stop and obstruct, but eventually he made it out with one manservant into the city. And what he saw, the first thing he saw was someone laying ill. And he'd never seen anyone ill before, because all of that sort of thing, anything that might raise compassion in him, for human beings, because actually he had seen some, there was one particular time when his brother, who was particularly not nice, kind of the opposite of the prince, shot a swan or a goose, and they brought it, and the Buddha immediately cried and day and night nursed the bird until it was better. So there were chances for the compassion to come out, but it still didn't really have a massive effect on him until he went out and met the people. And when he saw what some of them were going through, because obviously in those days, the medical, etc., when you've got something wrong with you, there was not much medical care. And so life was far more fragile than it is now. And he saw all this suffering. And it completely shattered all the illusion of the luxury. And he immediately, a wave came over him of compassion for all beings, and the decision to find the way out of suffering, all this suffering of life that every being has to face, all of us have to face. And so he decided that there must be a way. And so he left the palace, causing many problems in the palace. Obviously, they weren't happy because he was supposed to be the heir to the throne, but he just walked off and gave everything away. And the first thing he did was he went to the highest teacher that he could find, the highest spiritual teacher that he could find. And this Rupadatu, anyway, is the great spiritual master who had dedicated his whole life to meditation. And he had found well, basically what he'd done is what they call the transcendence of perception. So it transcended all perception, seeing, hearing, smelling, tasting, feeling, thinking, it all, and he had found a certain level of, you can call it minor enlightenment or liberation. And the Buddha asked if he could, or the prince asked if he could join in and learn this, and the master said yes. And so he taught him, and the Buddha accomplished the same level as the teacher within days. And the great master teacher said, okay, so we both are the same level now, so you help me teach, we've got many people. And he said, no, he said, I must find the real way. This isn't the actual end, this isn't enough. And he left, and he found another teacher, and the second teacher he found transcended consciousness, actually managed to transcend consciousness. And again, within a few days, he matched that level. And so in the end, he gave up trying to find a teacher and went off and spent 6 years in meditation, full meditation, and attained what you see here, which is the emanation body of absolute perfection of wisdom and compassion. It's the highest, purest form. And you now, just looking at it, if you can remember this form, the gold body, the right hand, well, the mudra is not so important, but anyway, the right hand is touching the ground. The left hand is in meditation posture, and the usnisha, the mound on the top of the head, and the swallow's wings, eyebrows, and there's a small hair curl at the bridge of the nose, and the long earlobes. Anyway, so I'm going through this description so that you can remember. If at any point you feel stressed or fearful or anxious, or you have any kind of concerns like this, or even any time, even when you're feeling happy, if you remember this form, visualize this, you will find that it has a beneficial effect on your mind, because it's actually a very sacred, special, it's not a worldly thing. Just like this evening's talk is not a worldly thing. You have a special spiritual interest, and we are talking about something very sacred and a special, spiritual, deep subject. I understand, that it's not like a normal talk. And what I'm hoping is that it will inspire you to go deeper, investigate. The Buddha said, don't just have faith in me and my teachings, what I've explained, even though he explained it directly from his experience. You have to understand that the Buddha's teachings are a direct explanation of what he went through on the journey from where we are now, sentient being, to fully enlightened being. And that fully enlightened being means no more suffering, absolute control over rebirth, no more, just, and the main thing about it is so much benefit to others. They are, although the Buddha is not physically visible now, at this very moment, all the blessings and the actual Buddha is available to us through faith. It's a very, very important connection that one has in one's heart. And with strong faith, if you visualize this normally without faith, it's fine. But if you visualize this with faith, you will find something very, very special changes immediately in the heart. Obviously, when we become Buddhist, we take refuge. We take refuge with an authentic lineage guru. And Khenpo Lekshe was here before last year and before Christmas, and he is an absolute perfect Sakya master of the Sakya tradition, which comes from directly the Buddha's teachings, the unbroken lineage. And he is a great example. He is a guide for us who can lead us properly. I'm just explaining the general basis of practice. But if you want to get into the details, and if you want the real experience and learn it's almost, what I'm trying to say is it's like learning directly from the Buddha. Those people, those very, very fortunate beings who were with the Buddha at that time, born very fortunately around the Buddha's, area and available. It's so much, the good fortune of that is ridiculous. But also we have that good fortune now because there are still what we call authentic lineage masters in this world. And so it's our very great good fortune that they are in a realm, in a world that we have been born in. And not only that, but also we have the good fortune of having health and time and conditions to practice. There are so many beings who do not have these conditions. There are so many beings who are distracted by, all sorts of things, all sorts of obstructions, war, poverty, and also don't have the ability to practice any kind of spiritual practice because of the various problems internally and externally. And we don't have that. We have everything at the moment. And so what I'm saying to you is, let's join together in our spiritual interest. It's not really, and we're calling it a Sakya group. We're talking about a Sakya group. But actually, spiritual practice is a very personal thing. The majority of your practice and realizations and success will be done on your own in meditation. Meditation is the thing that really changes our mind. The Buddhist path is the path of inner mind changing, transformation, cleansing the mental path, the mental continuum. And so it requires removing, as I say, the blockages. There's a covering over the natural mind, which has been put there by all our past lives, all our grasping, all our negative deeds. And what the spiritual path does is it gently removes that covering and it reveals the natural pure mind. And that natural pure mind is fearless, deathless, and all of the problems and sufferings that we normally have to face in life disappear. And so I strongly recommend this path. It's a gradual, it's not instant. You can't have instant enlightenment. You can't have instant liberation. But I am guaranteeing you that it works. And the living proof that it works is the gurus. Khenpo Lekshe, although you can't see it, there's certain clues. But Buddhahood, the path to Buddhahood, the Buddhist path, it definitely works. It's not just for the benefit of this life. There are many benefits from it. Patience, increased compassion and kindness. This is the main thing, the loving kindness that comes. Because at the moment we are quite selective with our loving kindness. It's just people we know, people that we like. When it comes to strangers or people that we've never met, then we're not quite so concerned. But the Buddha, a fully enlightened Buddha, and one of the main secrets to attaining enlightenment is universal compassion. It's the same full love that a mother has for her child, for every single being, without exception. Every type of being, animals, humans, insects, and there are a lot more other beings in other realms, apart from the ones that we can see in this world at the moment. And you have equal love and compassion and kindness for all of them. And this is one of the main meditations.